Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Rockman 7 FC. In the last part we started off the game and now we're heading after good old Junkman. I love his sprite in this version, that's such a good sprite to me. Let's see, Junkman, a robot originally created to gather parts that can be recycled from garbage. Good point, he's an economist. Bad point, too much passion. He likes junk food, and he dislikes raw garbage. Gotta make sure you cook it first, clearly. So this stage is one that I've always found to be kind of weird in that it's one of the only stages where the items you can get along the way are split along different pathways. By and large, say like the rush plates you've been gathering since the last part or otherwise, usually you can get them on one singular path. You actively need to take a death if you want to get everything in this stage in one go, which is a little annoying. With that said, one of those things is one of the most useful items in the game, so if you're going to prioritize only doing one run, go for this one. Take out the freeze cracker, freeze that lava, and you can break right through it. You can actually make basically any of the lava in this stage frozen and not an instant kill hazard if you do this. And since I don't recall Junkman having any kind of weakness to it, might be worth it. So there I got the final of the rush plates, so I'm taking a death here to be reset, a checkpoint back to right after that small elevator section to take the higher path. But for getting all four, we get the Super Adapter, which is a combination of the Gen Adapter and Power Adapter from Mega Man 6. We have a pretty good reaching diagonal double jump. We have a charge shot that's now a tracking homing punch of sorts. It's really good and it does absurd damage. In fact, I'd say usually the charge shot of this does comparable damage to most bosses' main weaknesses, so might be worth using. Now that we're in this room, then we want to use Thunderbolt on that little generator there to turn on the elevator of sorts in this room. You can use this to actively go up and down the main part of the vertical section here, but the main reason you want to do that is that it moves a particular platform out of the way, allowing us to grab this item right here. That is Rush Jet. Works the same in this game as it does in Mega Man's 4 Beyond. You automatically move forward and can be used to ignore a lot of hazards. I'd say it's still pretty good. I forget if the main problem I have with Mega Man 7 Rush Jet is still present in this version. I want to say it is. Wherein, if memory serves at least, you actively have to wait for Rush to crouch down before you can use him? Yes, you do. He doesn't immediately just go into the Rush Jet formation. You need to wait a second. And I think 7's the only game that really does it like that for all the Rush abilities. Mind you, now that I think about it, Mega Man 7 was the last classic Mega Man game to use a lot of the classic Rush abilities in the same way for a while. Because Mega Man 8, you don't have Rush Jet in normal levels, you only have it in the few auto-scroller levels like Tengu Man stage or that one Wily stage. Rush Coil is basically non-existent in that game at all, so, I think it took until Mega Man 9 to get the main set back, and that was like, what, 13 years after 7, I think? Either way, time for Junkman, who is a case of we get to see more of his moveset now that he no longer flinches with every Thunderbolt. The first thing he's going to do is jump up high and then land on the floor, causing debris to fall randomly from the ceiling, and then he's going to magnetize all of that to his hand, which he's invincible during. Then he's going to send it at you, jump over it as best he can. It's a good enough jump, but Rush Coil can be used to help out there. He'll then jump up, land on the block, and create a shield out of it that he'll then send at you, which can stun you for a second. He sometimes will try to move into you at that point, it's kind of random. Other times he'll just jump across the whole length of the field and swing downwards, sending a single piece of debris directly at your location when he throws it. So if you're walking and sliding, it's easy enough to avoid. That's the only attack you really see if you use his weakness on him in the original main Mega Man 7. And for beating him, we get a decent enough shield weapon. We're gonna get the Junk Shield. You press the button and you generate a bunch of trash around you that can damage enemies outwardly. It can't block projectiles, but it's good enough at just taking care of some of the smaller enemies if you're trying to just keep the speed moving forward. And when you press the button again, it sends the junk out in 3 separate directions. Only one of them I think is really useful because shooting it straight ahead is really good. Shooting it behind you, above and below, is a little more awkward to hit with. And at this point, this is where things get interesting. We're now in a second weakness chain. Because of how the original Mega Man 7 worked, where you only had 4 Robot Masters to start, the second set of Robot Masters have weaknesses to some of the main 4, but sometimes enemies will have 2 weaknesses. That's why when we went over, I think it was Burst Man, I mentioned he was weak to Turboman's weapon. Because Turboman himself, alongside some other Robot Masters, have some kind of ups and downs with their weaknesses. With that said, time for Turboman stage, which starts with a mini-boss that is much easier in this version, I find, just because I can fire my Mega Buster more quickly in the 8-bit graphics than I can in the 16-bit graphics from memory. So, Turboman. A battle robot modified from an automobile. He has a cutting-edge car stereo system installed. Good point, he's quick on his feet. Bad point, he's got low mileage. He likes straight stretches, and he dislikes Burst Man. Well, that's just rude. I'd like to note that came out of nowhere, too, because his dislike in the Japanese data is punks and bumpy roads. This part of the stage is the reason I don't really like this stage, though. The tires here, when you jump into them, you get bounced back with a surprising amount of momentum. And that's not annoying on its own. What is those tires on the bottom right of the screen right now. Because the center of that little group there is a hidden pit that leads to another room, and we now need to defeat another mini-boss and backtrack up to there from the left. It's one of the few times the series actively has a moment like this, and I do not like it. I'd argue Turboman stage was a stage that I tore myself out of more often than I put myself into when I first played Mega Man 7, because I just hated that pit that much. Also, you might be noticing I'm using the Super Adapter a lot in this stage. The Super Adapter, I think, is just a better way to play through Mega Man 7 period, because your charge shot, I think, not only is quicker, but it does more damage in general. On top of that, the double jump is just handy to have in a game like this. It's the reason why the Jet Adapter is so good in Mega Man 6. It just makes the platforming a non-issue for the most part. If you combine it with Rush Jet, especially interchangeably, it's just super good. Now, coming up here is something that's changed, I believe, from the original game. We got some traffic lights down there, and they're lighting up all flashy-like. You know, on Thunderbolt and come up here, you might notice that traffic light isn't lighting up. We can use Thunderbolt on it to get another item as soon as I get past this damn tire enemy. There we go. Finally got the knowledge to shoot. And doing that will light up the lights and eventually pop out this. This is the Rocket Punch. I actually misspoke earlier, now that I think about it. That allows your Super Adapter's charge shot to home in on enemies. Before that, it doesn't do that. I know that whistle again. All 4 rush plates. Oh, the S armor's too bulky to let you slide. I guess that's something I did forget to mention, huh? Mega Man, good luck. When you have the Super Adapter equipped, you cannot slide. And that's like one of the few scenes that feels kind of weirdly translated overall. This fan translation that Graph78 did is, in general, really good. With keeping the dialogue relatively consistent and sensible. That scene just feels like it needed another proofreading, honestly. And here I am doing the classic thing you've been able to do with Eddie since Mega Man 4. If you don't collect the item he spits out immediately, you can go back down through a ladder and come back up until you get an item you want. I'm particularly going for like an energy tank or an extra life in most cases, because either I'm too low on health to worry about dying, or I don't need weapon energy outwardly as much as I do some other things. Now, if it's not the tires that annoy me in this stage, it's these fire pillars. These ones aren't too bad because they just do a hefty, like, what, 4 or 5 damage period. It's the screen after this I greatly dislike, because we're gonna have to deal with flamethrowers that work like force beams from Quick Man stage and Mega Man 2. These are instant kill, and you need to analyze level design quickly, otherwise you're just going to die. I die here a lot on any playthrough of this game. It's easily my least favorite part of any of the main 8 stages of the game that I can think of, barring maybe going for 100% in a certain other stage, but we'll talk more about that later this part, actually. For now, it's time for a mini-boss against the truck. Use Thunderbolt on the eyes, it does extreme damage. Like I've said, the Thunderbolt is easily the best just special weapon for random enemies in the game, because it just does, you got a lot of ammo for it, and it does a lot of damage. With that said, we're now coming up on Turboman himself, but we don't have his weakness. At least his biggest weakness. The Super Adapter with its fully charged shot will do good enough. I think it does roughly 2 damage per, but the main thing he's weak against is Shade Man's weapon. So we're gonna have to do this fight the old fashioned way. Turboman can be kind of rough because of his fire scorch wheel attack, which will scroll across the screen, go up the wall, and then land and create a bit of a firefall effect. But because Mega Man 7 has unique elemental properties to some attacks like it, where when you get hit by a fire attack, you'll take some extra lingering damage and you're stunned for a few moments. Ice can similarly freeze you, just like in the Freeze Man fight. When he's not doing that, he's using his engines to rev forward and suck you towards him, and then he'll sometimes just do charges across the screen. Notably though, if memory serves, he had much more distinct sound effects when he was doing that attack in the original game, where he would stall his engines a bit to try and trick you into jumping early. I think it's all the same sound effect here, so you just kind of have to figure out which one he's doing. He does tend to go short, long, short, I've noticed, with his little revs, but that could just even be just personal experience skewing what's actually happening. That fight can be rough, but it's worth it because getting his weapon now allows us to get through the other stages in a pretty streamlined manner. And for beating him, we get the Scorch Wheel. You send a fire forward that can track along the ground, leaves a little bit of a lingering fire effect. It does good damage. The big thing is I don't like how fast it takes to actually come out compared to some other weapons. But it also allows us to do that fire effect on certain hazards or elements in stages. Speaking of which, time for Slashman. Let's see. Slashman is in charge of the dinosaur unit. His mobility is too high for his comrades to catch up with. Good point. He's lean and wild. Bad point, he's sticky fingered. Is it because he's got claws? It feels like a different kind of sticky. He likes vegetables and he dislikes nail clippers. And also, weirdly, deeply personal moment. I only realized that Slashman has like a little metal goatee, like earlier this year, late last. I always took that as just some weird part of chest armor, but no, he's got a little goatee and I preferred not knowing that. So this stage, barring having log fluming, like Super Mario Bros. 2 USA, is a little different in that its essential platforming mechanic isn't necessarily the same as some of the prior ones have been, like here's some junk you can get lost in and you have to magnetize yourself to the ceiling in some cases, or Yoku blocks. It's namely this upcoming screen, we got these little guys. You jump on their backs, they wake up and they start moving forward and jump over pits and spikes. If you jump down at any point, you will die. It's just a matter of timing your own jumps off of them and avoiding the enemies that can potentially knock you off. Super Adapter's really good for this, just to help with your survivability. I don't know why though, this stage always felt kind of bare despite this mechanic though, because while this is cute, for the most part it's otherwise just pretty straightforward sections of level with not much of note. You take the low path there to potentially get this the hard way, but Super Adapter just allows us to get that up right. If anything, I also dislike this stage because of the next part when I first played it. Kicked my ass because I couldn't figure out the best way to handle things. We're coming up on the mini-boss for this stage. The best way to deal damage to it is with Thunderbolt, because I just didn't realize its power back then. We're being chased by a T-Rex, and we need to actively destroy it once we reach the end of the road here. You need to target its jaw, and I found aiming for that kind of hard enough as it is, but this thing's got a surprisingly hardy amount of health if you're not using Thunderbolt. You need to watch out not only for its gigantic size and hitbox, but out of that giant hole on its belly, it can also fire projectiles that can do some decent tracking and damage, and also it breathes fire. I always forget about that part because it seldom does that to me. In fact, if anything, that's the first time I've had it not fire projectiles out of its belly in a long time. Coming up here, though, we got some woods. Weren't we told to burn the woods last time? This is why I've gone through the stages in the order I have. By using Scorch Wheel, we can destroy the wildlife here. Yay! But doing it reveals this ladder, which allows us to go get something neat. Up here in a cage is good old Beat, and if you destroy it by using a charge or just shooting it too much otherwise, you then gain Beat as an ability. He works, if memory serves, about the same way he did in 5 and 6, where you press the button, you summon him in, and he'll just swoop at enemies occasionally. I don't think any particular enemies are weak against him. If anything, I'd say out of all of Beat's appearances in the main games, this is arguably his least useful. Because he's really good in 5. In 6, he's got some moments. 8, if memory serves, his ability in the auto-scrolling stages are really good. In 9 and 10, his purpose was changed, if memory serves. Or was that in fan games by that point? I forget. Either way, it's time for Slashman, who I find notably easier in this version of the game, because in the original game, when you hit him with Freeze Cracker, which is his best weakness, hit him with the main bit for I think 6 units of damage in the base one, he would take damage, but then he would get frozen and slip and slide left and right across the room, hitting the walls, and you could still get hit by him at that point if memory serves. And then he would do this attack where he leaves the screen, slides down, while fruit drops down that can come up your controls or keep you stuck in one place, and then do the charge. Because he no longer slips and slides, this fight's immediately less chaotic to me and much easier to process. With that said, need to be careful because if he gets up in your face, he will slash at you, and that can do some pretty good damage. If you don't have Freeze Cracker, for some reason, he's also notably weak against the Scorch Wheel, but that does less damage than the main shot of the Freeze Cracker. And for beating him, we get the rare melee weapon for Classic Mega Man. We're going to get the Slash Claw. You slash with your fist and it does some damage, plain and simple. It's got more range than you'd think for a close range weapon, but it's definitely more useful against bosses that it's weak against and smaller enemies than it would be mini bosses or anything like that. Out of all the weapons in the game, it's probably the one I've used the least overall, barring the enemy that's weak against it. It's time for us to tackle Springman. There's an old CMS Pyro Wolf reference to make here, but that animation, even on YouTube, I think is getting close to 16 years old, and I forget if it was up on Newgrounds earlier than that anyway, so a bit dated. So Springman stage, we're going to talk more about the mechanic at first here, is based around springs. I know, big surprise. But you want to be careful with these, because they're the type like the ones from Mario, I think 2 is where those introduced, where when you hold down the jump button, you bounce higher, and when they start putting those both on the floor and walls and ceiling, it can be kind of chaotic to control on a first time through, so take your time here and absorb your surroundings before you start holding down the A button at all times. With that said, let's talk about Springman. His body consists of as many as 2,000 springs. He boasts an extremely high bounce. Good say. Good point, he's spontaneous. Bad point, he's elusive. He likes high jumps and he dislikes low ceilings. Deep characterization. Now, this honestly wouldn't be a bad first choice for a stage, but I think Springman, despite the meminess of him, can be kind of chaotic for a first boss, so I don't recommend it. Plus, this is one of those cases where, because it's from the second set of stages on the 16-bit version, in order to get 100% in this stage, we need the Super Adapter, so not the best bet if you want to do this game in as few visits to stages as possible. But this stage is kind of unique because from memory, it's one of the first stages with a full 4-way scrolling room. Because in the NES games, they couldn't really do that as well, so it was either always vertical or always horizontal, not many times where it was both. And this room is one of the first ones that was both. In fact, this is where the item we need is. We want to get to the top left with these boxes here. Whenever you're on one of these boxes and you jump, it rotates the box 90 degrees, and then the fist that will pop out of them where the arrows is will aim that direction. And we can aim it at the wall here on the left to get access to a little room. In the original game, this room was where you got Otto's Hyper Bolt, which reduced the prices at the shop. In this game, it's where we get the energy balancer, which, like with other Mega Man games, makes it so that if you collect weapon energy when the weapon you have is either full, or if you're on the Buster, it'll go to whatever is the lowest. One of my favorite things they ever added to the franchise. Then Mega Man X just had it inherently, if memory serves. Also, weird now that I think about it, I think this is like one of the 4 screens in this game I think of whenever I just think about this game. It's this, the first part of the Wily Fortress when we get there. Probably where the Rush Plate is in Freezeman stage, and that damn tire back in Turboman stage now that I think about it. With that said, it's time for Springman. He's really only weak to the Slash Claw, so get that out. Springman, get this, is a bouncy boss fight, right? Right. Every now and then he'll jump all the way across the screen, but stop halfway and levitate for a second, doing downwards punches that aim for where you are that are actually surprisingly quick in this version, so that's probably going to hit you pretty hard. He can lay down some springs that will jump high or low across the screen while he himself bounces to try and trap you between rock and a hard place. And if he has another attack, I forget what it is, because as you can see, Slash Claw does enough damage that with a handy E-Tank to not die, isn't much to write home about. He's chaotic if you don't have his weakness, but with his weakness, he's pretty easy even without the stun locking you could do back in the SNES version. And for beating him, we get arguably the most complex weapon in the game. We're gonna get his Wild Coil. You press the button, you fire one of those springs forward, and it bounces low. You can then charge it, though, to have it bounce higher and do more damage. On top of that, though, and they show it off here pretty well, if you hold up or down when you release it, it'll bounce higher or lower. In fact, knowing that, which isn't very well explained in the Super Nintendo version, is the main way to deal damage to the final boss. But with that, I'm gonna need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 3, we're gonna go tackle the final Robot Masters before starting off the fortress. See you guys then.